I was in about 3rd grade, and I remember him getting shot and getting home from school, and my older sisters and Mom and Dad were crying and bawling.
I was in high school in Greece, and I'm shocked, and I heard the newspapers and the radio, and the school's closed.
Working at Douglas County Hospital.
How'd you hear it?
On the radio.
One of the unique things about the Kennedy assassination is that people do remember where they were at that time. It's the, I think the only time in the last 40 years where overwhelming number of people who were at least of high school age remember what they were doing at the moment they heard the news.
Channel 6 News presents JFK, the tragedy remembered. A special report with Channel 6 News anchor and senior correspondent Gary Kerr.
Where were you at that time, 30 years ago? That is, if you're old enough to remember.
I suppose everybody back then was touched by it when it happened.
Yeah, you weren't even born then.
No, not by a long shot.
What he says happened to the bullet. What do you think about the possibility of that having occurred?
It's a small class this semester at UNO for G.L. Kuchel's course, Assassination of JFK.
You know, number one, they talk about the tragedy. Not only he being killed, but then his younger brother being killed also, you know, a few years later. And they see that there was a potential for a Kennedy dynasty. And they think that we really lost something when we lost that.
We lost it 30 years ago Monday. And during the next half hour, we'll talk to some people in Dallas who remember it well. Meet the man in the Stetson hat handcuffed to Lee Harvey Oswald. The Nebraska congressman who helped reinvestigate the assassination. The Des Moines attorney who was on the staff of the Warren Commission. The Channel 6 reporter sent to Dallas to cover it and went on to become a network correspondent. And see the sniper's lair from where the Warren Commission says Lee Harvey Oswald fired the shots. The Dallas airport, noon on November 22nd, 1963. The President and Mrs. Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally and his wife get into their car to motorcade to a speech at the Trade Mart in downtown Dallas.
The President was advised not to go to Dallas in the first place, not to ride in an open car, and to have, if he's going to do that, at least have the agents on the vehicle, and he did not.
Now Douglas County Sheriff Dick Roth was a Secret Service agent back then. He had provided protection for the president, although not in Dallas on that day. The crowds were large and enthusiastic along the motorcade route.
Came one block to Elm Street and made a sharp turn onto Elm, going down this direction.
And then Dealey Plaza downtown, and the 3 shots. The first missed. There was a shot that went through Kennedy's back and into Connally, and then there was the 3rd shot that hit Kennedy in the head.
That's the Warren Commission's conclusion.
Bob Porter is head of what's called the 6th floor exhibit on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building, from where Lee Harvey Oswald is believed to have fired those 3 shots. He sat there looking out the window with boxes stacked up behind him to prevent anyone else who might be on the floor from seeing him. There was pandemonium outside. People dropped to the ground, later describing what they had seen.
As he was waving back, the shot rang out and he slumped down in the seat, and his wife reached up toward him, and as he was slumping down, and the 2nd shot went off and it just knocked him down.
The presidential limousine was rushed to Dallas's Parkland Hospital. Governor Connally would survive, but the 3rd shot that hit the president was fatal.
May we all stand for a moment?
The Trade Mart, where the president was headed for his speech. It was from here the world would first learn that the president had died. It came from a newsman who was assigned to cover the president at the Trade Mart.
I had a doctor that I knew from Parkland walk up to me while I was on the air, and he just came up and whispered in my ear, and he said, "Eddie, he's dead." And I said, "How do you know?" And he said, "I just called Parkland, and he was DOA."
The official word came a few minutes later.
Died at approximately 1 o'clock Central Standard Time today here in Dallas. He died of a gunshot wound in the brain.
Well, I was just floored. And I couldn't, you know, the first thing came to my mind, gee, there must be a coup.
Many others wondered the same as the search for the shooter or shooters went on in Dealey Plaza. Among others, they sought Lee Harvey Oswald, an employee of the book depository who couldn't be found. They got him that afternoon several miles away in Dallas after he shot and killed a Dallas police officer who stopped him for questioning, and then he tried to hide in a movie theater.
All got in a cluster around him and managed to get him subdued and handcuffed.
The scuffle was here at the Texas Theater. Jerry Hill was one of the officers that captured Lee Harvey Oswald inside this now boarded up theater.
By just sheer numbers and weight, we forced him to the floor and handcuffed him. And we handcuffed him on the floor.
He was struggling.
He was struggling the entire time, and for a little man, he was very strong.
As reporters and photographers waited in a hallway, Oswald was questioned Friday night and Saturday.
We have been able to establish the fact that he was at the window that the shots were fired from.
It was the next morning, Sunday morning, that Oswald was shot to death by nightclub owner Jack Ruby as Oswald was being moved from the Dallas City Jail to the county jail.
He's been shot.
But I saw Ruby standing in that crowd, right in front of the crowd, with a pistol at his side, had it in his hand by his side, out of the corner of my eye.
It is one of the world's most publicized pictures. The man in the Stetson next to Oswald is Dallas Police Detective Jim Lavelle.
We determined that it took him roughly just a little better than 1 second to make those 2 short steps and bang, and he double actioned a revolver into Oswald's stomach. Of course, I was handcuffed to him, and I had him by the belt, and he's right up close to me, and when I saw him coming, I tried to pull Oswald behind me, but it didn't happen without any leverage. If he lapsed into unconsciousness almost immediately, he just groaned and went down.
The only thing that I'm mad at Jack Ruby about was he killed Lee Harvey Oswald before we had a chance to try Lee Harvey Oswald. To go into an open court and show the world what evidence we had that Lee Harvey Oswald was the trigger man.
I think it was all conspiracy myself.
And most Americans, in fact, believe there was some kind of conspiracy, that Oswald did not act alone. We'll examine that in a moment.
I don't think we've heard the truth about it or anything close to it.
There's simply no way that one gunman could have shot the President of the United States.
And I thought from the very moment that I heard it that it was a conspiracy, and so did my friends.
And that was the opinion of most of the tourists we interviewed one Sunday afternoon in Dealey Plaza. They point toward the 6th floor window from which the Warren Commission says Oswald fired the shots, but most believe he had accomplices.
Those bullets ballistically came from Oswald's rifle to the exclusion of all other weapons in the world.
David Bellin, now a Des Moines attorney, was one of 14 lawyers who investigated the assassination for the government's Warren Commission.
If you would have seen the physical evidence that I have seen, if you would have held in your hands the portions of the bullet that struck President Kennedy's head and killed him that came from Oswald's rifle, you would conclude the way I concluded, that beyond a reasonable doubt, Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gunman who killed President Kennedy.
Back here at the corner there was a steam pipe.
But it's the other view that gets the most attention, provided by people like Dan Stevens of Dallas, who gathers tourists about him and is part of a growing conspiracy industry here. You can get the Eternal Flame for $3 or a JFK souvenir paper for $1.
After the shots were being fired, about 30 people ran up the grassy knoll there to try and catch the gunman.
Or Bobby Dobbs will sell you his Kennedy Chronicle with graphic autopsy pictures. The second set of windows down, that's where the Warren Commission says Oswald fired from. The street the president's car was coming down. The shots fired when his car got to about where you see the back of that sign. To the left of the sign, that's the grassy knoll, from where conspiracy advocates believe there were one or more additional shooters either there or behind a picket fence above the grassy knoll. The holes in the fence are where tourists have taken out boards. Messages adorn the new boards. One day the truth will be known. Another blaming the mafia, CIA, FBI, and Dallas police.
Captain Fritz had Oswald in jail, and I had the son of a bitch filed on before midnight of the day that he committed both murders, so I don't know how much better you can do than that.
You're not apologizing for anything.
No, I give the critics the universal sign among grown men.
Bill Alexander is a little sensitive. In 1963, he was assistant district attorney in Dallas, investigated the case, in on most of the interrogation of Oswald.
Oh, it's all a bunch of foolishness. There was no shot from the grassy knoll. There were 3 shots fired, only 3 shots fired.
Well, this is the entrance to the museum, which is actually on the back of the building, which formerly was the Texas School Book Depository.
And an average of 1,300 people a day come here. The building is now a Dallas government building, except for this 6th floor. For $4, you can get what many describe as the official version of the assassination, although museum officials beg to differ.
Well, this is what you would call a neutral exhibit. It doesn't take any point of view.
We are basically trying to tell the truth in what happened.
And they're not?
Well, it's kind of bland. There's very little about the conspiracy and what really happened.
A block away from the official exhibit, Larry Howard carries a replica of Oswald's rifle for the conspiracy exhibit that he was assembling in late October, open to the public for another $4. Howard believes Oswald didn't even fire it that day.
My opinion is that rogue elements within the government and the CIA killed John Kennedy with the mafia as a junior partner. And then it was covered up at the very top using Lee Harvey Oswald as the patsy.
For one thing, there was Oswald's communist connections, living in the Soviet Union for a time. And because of his support for Cuba's Fidel Castro, 3 months before the assassination, he was interviewed by a New Orleans TV station.
Well, I would very definitely say that I am a Marxist. That is correct. But that does not mean, however, that I'm a communist.
What is the difference between the two?
Well, there's a great deal of difference.
And they sold this lemon to the American public.
Zapruder film is the proof they didn't count on, Lou.
Fueling the conspiracy theories in recent years, Kevin Costner's portrayal of New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison in the movie JFK. Filmmaker Oliver Stone depicted Garrison attempting to show the assassination was planned at the highest levels of the U.S. government. At one point, it shows somebody letting Jack Ruby into where Ruby can shoot Oswald.
Of course, I was against that. I worked with Stone on that movie, and
oh, did you?
Yeah, I was a technical advisor with him. I told him I had a bunch of BS. I didn't, but he went ahead and put it in there anyhow.
I think our mistake was that we had 2 nuts in town at the same time, and that's Oswald and Ruby. And Ruby's intentions were to make money. I'll get off of this on public sentiment. I'll make $1 million because everybody will come to my nightclub and see the man that killed the president.
That's as long as I've known you, you've never done anything to hurt police officers before, but I said, you didn't do us any favor when you shot Oswald. He said, Lavelle, all I wanted to do is be a hero. And he said, looked like I just fouled things up.
Gary, this is the final report of the House Assassinations Committee.
Former Nebraska Congressman Charlie Thone. Over the years, the assassination created so much controversy that in the late 1970s, a House committee was appointed to reinvestigate. The committee concluded there probably was a conspiracy, but Charlie Thone and some other members of the committee issued a minority statement saying they didn't believe it because of what it was based on.
No way, no way. The committee got off the track because some acoustical experts, as I indicated to you at the last minute, came in and they decided from an old police tape from a motorcycle policeman there that there was a shot from the so-called Grassy Knoll area. Later on, some real experts out of Harvard University and elsewhere discounted that thing and agreed with us that there was no shot from the Grassy Knoll.
In the electronic media, and particularly movies and television programs, literally only one side of the story has been told, and in the case of JFK, over $100 million has been grossed from telling and giving disinformation about the assassination.
This is Dallas, Texas, the day after infamy.
Steve Bell, who went on to become a network correspondent, was Channel 6's man in Dallas back then. In a moment, we'll hear from him and tell you how that year's Nebraska-Oklahoma game figured into events surrounding the assassination.
This is Steve Bell reporting for WOWT TV from Dallas, Texas.
He was Channel 6's man in Dallas back then.
I didn't know how to do stand-uppers on that kind of story. I'd never had any experience at that level. And so I'm standing out there in the middle of the street, and poor Bob Moakler is moving his camera back and forth.
On a recent visit to his hometown of Oskaloosa, Iowa, he remembered it for us. Bell went on to become a network correspondent, anchored ABC's World News This Morning for 11 years, is now a communications professor at Ball State University in Indiana. He remembers Oswald being moved down the hallway at the city jail, past a horde of reporters and photographers.
They would take him right by us in the hallway, and we would all scream and yell our questions and hold our microphones in, and here was Lee Harvey Oswald, the accused assassin of the President of the United States, being taken down a corridor full of reporters and onlookers.
Never happened today.
Never happened today.
And of course, ultimately, the chief should have banned him from there, is what should have happened. But if he had banned him out, everybody out of the city hall, we'd have been blamed then for freedom of press, not having the opportunity to get in and question and all of this.
These hallway pictures were taken by Channel 6's Bob Moakler, Steve Bell's photographer in Dallas.
The only thing I remember about the questioning was the fact that he refused to answer any questions, but at the end of the hallway, he kind of turned around and said, you know, they're violating my constitutional rights, they won't give me a shower. And that kind of threw me at the time. I thought, of all the things going on, he's concerned about his shower, you know.
Saturday night, the day after the assassination, and Bell and the others are interviewing Dallas Police Chief Jesse Curry, who planned to move Oswald to the county jail.
And we got through with our interview, and I said, Chief, could you tell us what time you're going to move him tomorrow morning? He said, I'll tell you guys why. He said, go get yourself a good night's sleep. My wife's after me to go to church, so I want to move him at 10:30.
But the Dallas police chief was very accommodating. I think he was trying to give us some Texas hospitality, and so he was trying to accommodate everybody, and actually, in a way, it was his undoing.
Well, if you'll be here at 10 o'clock, you won't miss it.
And that's how it all got out.
Yeah, that's how it got out. And the shooting actually took place at 11:21 our time.
The problem was the word got out they were going to move him in the morning, and the word spread, and everybody knew they were going to move him in the morning then.
Including Jack Ruby, who Sunday morning shot Oswald to death as they were taking him from the city jail.
As Steve Bell and Bob Moakler were here at the assassination scene in Omaha, everybody was trying to figure out how to best observe this terrible tragedy.
The day of the assassination, that night, the cast of Gideon went ahead with the production at the Omaha Community Playhouse. Cast members didn't want to, but 350 patrons had shown up to see it. They must have been among the few out that night.
The streets were deserted. I've never seen anything quite like it. Downtown Omaha and Lincoln were totally deserted. People were home, glued to they act like they were in a trance. It was something unbelievable. They had never experienced anything like this before, to have the President of the United States assassinated.
Nebraska Governor Frank Morrison was hosting the Midwest Governors Conference in Omaha when word came.
There was a consensus we ought to call off all large public meetings, including football games, and all the governors were going to call their coaches to have the games canceled next day.
But Bud Wilkinson, who had been pretty close to the president, he said he knew Kennedy pretty well, and he thought that President Kennedy would like to have the game played.
Bud Wilkinson was the coach of the Oklahoma Sooners, who on Saturday, the day after the assassination, played Nebraska in Lincoln. The Cornhuskers won the game 29-20 and the conference championship.
Well, it was the only major state university game that I know of in the whole of the United States that was played that next Saturday.
We had a few, letters and reprimands for it, but not anything that I wouldn't do the same thing again.
On Sunday, church services in Omaha were packed. They were turned into memorial services.
The Nebraska primary is not a primary which can be bypassed so easily.
1960, early that year, before the May primary in Nebraska. Kennedy's nomination to be the Democratic Party's candidate for president was by no means assured. For one thing, he was a Catholic, and some people claimed he would be ruled from Rome. Would that hurt him enough that he couldn't be elected in the November general election?
The anti-Catholic movement was significant.
A big supporter, Ephraim Marks, was Democratic Party chairman in Omaha at the time and had written to Kennedy 2 years earlier, "You are the man, and 1960 should be your year."
I personally believed that he was going to, regardless of the fact that he was a Catholic, he could be elected president.
The entire Kennedy family was involved. JFK's mother, Rose, on a trip to Nebraska, his brother, Bobby, and that's Bobby's wife, Ethel, shaking hands with Ephraim Marks, all of them here on behalf of JFK.
We were impressed by SAC before we came, but I must say we go with greater confidence than we came in the quality of the operation and in the caliber of the men who man it.
Kennedy's only visit to Nebraska after being elected president. At Offutt Air Base, he presented a citation for the Strategic Air Command's work in providing reconnaissance to identify Russian missile sites in Cuba, what led to the Cuban Missile Crisis.
What excited me about him was what excites everybody about him. He was young, ambitious, and terribly personable.
What we call our memory books, and this is where we invite people to write their thoughts. Of course, some of the more satisfying ones to us are the fact that say they maybe felt a sense of healing. This is frequently where the tears begin to flow. A lot of tears seen in the film on the screen and then also in the audience as well.